In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Actifio to create application-consistent snapshots of DB2 databases that are in-band on a host. Now, the testing done here, and what you're going to see here, is all done using AIX 6.1 with an Actifio copy data storage box running 6.0 and IBM's DB2 10.5. Now, in terms of applicability to other environments, this will work on any Unix operating system, or this process will work on any Unix operating system where we have a valid connector. It should work on Actifio Copy Data Storage 5.1 without any problems, and it should certainly work on earlier versions of DB2 because all we're doing is putting the DB2 database in hot backup mode and taking it out, which hasn't really changed in quite a few versions. So, with those things in mind, let's proceed. The first thing we need is obviously an AIX host in this example that's in band. And you can see I have an AIX host, AXL path 3, and you can certainly see that it's in band because if I click on the ports section here, you can see my WWPNs, and if I click on the storage, you can see the image mode in band LUNs being presented from my Storewise V7000 in the back end up to Actifio. So having got my host in band, I then need to install the connector on the host, so that's been done. And I then need to run application discovery on the host, which has been done. And I know it's been done because I can see the icon has changed. It's got that little Actifio symbol there. And obviously the other way I can know is if I go to Application Manager and I search for that particular host, I can see my LPAR 3 has lots of file systems that Actifio has discovered. So at this point, we are almost ready to start the process of doing application consistent snapshots. Two things we obviously need to do. The first is we need to apply a policy template. And in this example, you can see I've applied a policy template called AIX to that host. And we need to apply it to the file systems that contain my DB2 database. So this may require you to go to your DB2 administrator. There are some commands you can run to work out where the files are. In this example, all of the files for my specific DB2 database are in DB2 data. So that's the only file system I need to protect. There could be multiple file systems that I need to protect. And you can see that this file system is on an in-band vdisk because there's the vdisk name. That's the disk. So far so good. I've determined which file system I need to protect. I've applied a policy template, and then if I hover over it, I can see that I have a thing called an app ID, 6355. That's a significant number. We're going to need that number. So at this point, I need to do a little bit of work on the host. And before I do that, there's one thing you needed to have done on the connector, or on the Actifio box, which is you need to supply Actifio with logon credentials for the connector to use to run a pre-post script. So you can see here I've given it a user ID DB2inst1 and the DB2inst1 password. And this is pretty important because Actifio needs that user. Obviously, you could be tempted just to put the root user ID and password in there. That's fine for test labs. It certainly wouldn't be acceptable in a production environment. But I do need a user ID and password that can execute DB2 commands. So I'm now going to log on to my AXL path 3. Now you notice I am in the, I'll take you from the start. I'm in the /act folder. Now ACT folder or act folder is made by the Actifio connector. And what should exist in it is a folder called scripts. If it doesn't exist, you can just make it, make dir scripts. Actifio is going to look in the scripts folder for a file that is needed if we need to do any pre-post scripting. And because the connector is not DB2 aware, we do need to do a little bit of pre-post scripting. Now, the only gotcha here is that that folder or the files in it need to either be owned by the user ID you gave Actifio. Remember my user ID, DB2inst1. So in this example, what I've done is I've made my life very easy. I've made the folder owned by DB2inst1. So what this means is that I can then create files using my DB2inst1 user ID in there that are owned by DB2inst1 as well. You could make those files with root and change ownership, do 777, but that's really not good practice. So what I need is one file in this folder. Ignore all the other files in there. That's someone else doing some testing. I need one file in this folder which has a specific name, appid.6355, and is executable. You can see it's executable here. It's permissions 755. It's executable by the DB2inst1 user ID. Now that's critical because DB2inst1 is going to be the user used by the connector to try and run that file. Okay, so how did I determine the name of the file? Remember, it has to be appid.appid, the actual app ID. That 6355 came by hovering over the host. So what's in the file? If I cat it, you can see what it contains. Now, what the connector needs is two things. Well, it needs at least two things. It needs to know how to do what's called a freeze and how to do a thaw. We're not freezing the database, but the term freeze is a common term used to represent a task that is taken to prepare a file system or application for snapshot. A thaw is the task taken after snapshot to undo whatever you did. So what we do is we have this script. You can see it's a shell script. It's got the hash bang up there with bin sure. I've designed this fairly simply, and you might see a new version come out in the future. But all this does is it gives the path name to the DB2 binary, because we need the DB2 binary to be run, and it gives the names of the databases. You might only have one database, you might have two, you might have many. It doesn't actually matter. But what you can see is that in the free section, I connect to DB2, to the database specified by that DB2 name, DB name1 variable. I do write suspend, and write suspend is hot backup mode. I then connect to the other database, and again, as I said, you might not have it. You could remove these three lines. They might not be needed if you only have one database. That's the free section done. So we put it in hot backup mode. When Actifio is ready, then it then requests the connector to do a thaw, and you can see that the thaw section is here, and the thaw section, it connects to the database and does write resume, which is taking it out of hot backup mode. Now, as I say, just in terms of the language, freeze thaw doesn't mean we're freezing it, and write suspend doesn't mean that writes aren't possible. What the freeze means is we go into hot backup mode. The write suspend means that we stop hardening writes to disk. We only sort of keep them in a memory buffer that DB2 maintains. When write resume is run, then DB2 can now write those commands out to disk. Obviously, you don't want to leave DB2 in write suspend mode for a very long time because it might run out of RAM. Okay, so we've created the script. If we want to test the script, what we could do, it's very simple. We could actually run this command. So we could run .appid or appid.6355. Notice I use the / because ActScripts is not in any of my paths, and I use the word freeze. Now, obviously, this is a production database. You don't want to be mucking around for too long, but it's a very simple way to prove this. Run this command, and what should happen is that I should connect to DB2 and actually put it in hot backup mode. Now, if your end user is interested in actually seeing it, you can show it really easy where I can connect to BB3 DB1, which is my database, and I can list table spaces. And the table spaces, if you notice, when they all get listed, they're all write suspended. So this is the way I know that my script is definitely working, and that it performs exactly as I want. Now, as I said, at the moment it's in hot backup mode. So what I do, if I can remember to type the word quit, is I now rerun that command, appid.6355, and I do a thaw. And what the thaw will do is take it out of hot backup mode. So this is really simple, really neat. I've proven that my script can be run manually. Now I need to prove that Actifio can run the script. So after the application manager, highlight my application, go to my snapshot, and I'm going to do an on-demand snapshot. So as soon as I can convince this button to give me something, there we go. I hit run now, and I'm going to run the snapshot. Now, while it's doing it, I'm going to quickly nip back here, and I'm going to tail a file. And this file is udsagent.log, which is in the act log folder. And you can see I've just managed to get there in time. Actifio is now reaching out to the connector and saying, hey, I've got an SLA that requires application consistency. I need you to do whatever it is that's required to get an application consistent snapshot of the /db2 data folder file system. And so the connector is now doing the necessary tasks. Now, as part of that process, the connector will actually check in the /act/scripts folder for a file called appid.6355 because it knows that's the app ID of the application ID it's protecting. And if it's successful, what it will do is it will find my commands. Now, you can actually see if you were clever or if you're very observant, you would have spotted it. Here I've got queries for VDP snapshot executing free script. I'm launching that script. It's a freeze. And these come straight out of DB2. Look at that, set write suspend. So I know the connector put DB2 into hot backup mode. Now take a note of the time, 19:59 and 19 seconds. About 3 seconds later, here we are, 19:59:22, you can see me removing hot backup mode, taking it out of hot backup mode. So 3-4 seconds, this database isn't doing anything, so maybe in a production environment it would take longer, but still very quick, to actually get the Actifio part of the job done. We are really not slowing anything down here. And what I've now successfully done is a application consistent snapshot of that database. Now, I probably should show you just the fact that if I go and look at the AIX template, it's proof to you that it really is application consistent. So there's my AIX template, and if I click on that, you can see that, because that's obviously one of my important gotchas. I need to make its application consistent here, not crash consistent. In terms of gotchas, things that can go wrong, as you've clearly seen, the main thing is that the ownership of that file, appid6355, has to be executable by the user. And the best way to prove it is simply to log on as that user and run it the way you saw me do it, freeze and thaw. If that works, you should be able to proceed to the connector running it. And provided you've got the right name, everything else should flow successfully.